I'm really excited just for everyone who maybe does not know about Andrea. She's been in influencer marketing for over a decade now. So pretty much, I think she's like the most experienced person, like the veteran of influencer marketing that I've spoken with. So I'm really excited to do this. And what I especially love about you, Andrea, is that you never hold back from hold yourself back from saying something, even if it goes against the grain. And anybody who reads your LinkedIn regularly knows that. So I've always appreciated you about that for the, couple of years that I've been following your content. And I'm really excited to bring that same mindset of true fundamental thinking about influencer marketing, not, trends based and all that, like truly understanding influence and the game of influence. I think you really understand that. So, and you say it out loud, which I don't think a lot of people do. So I like that about you, and I'm excited to speak with you today.
Yeah, well, thank you for the introduction. I I do love like it's not about like me necessarily wanting to be a contrarian, but more of like me sharing whatever I find and whatever I learn and kind of the realizations that I get to after doing it for such a long time.
Uh-huh.
And there was such a long time that we did it in just the one specific way,
Yep.
and then the industry got big.
Mhm.
And then we had to start doing new things, start adapting, innovating, and all that. And all of a sudden, everyone had like a different perspective because it was so fragmented and
Yeah.
so so many different ways to do influencer marketing. And that's
Yeah.
why I prioritize the fundamentals, because I think
Yeah.
that if you understand the foundation, you can build anything on top of that.
I love that mindset, and that kind of takes me to the first question that I had for you, because there's all these, like you use the word fragmented, there's all these tactics out there, right? There's different people, different platforms, different agencies that are content creators talking about, hey, you should do seeding, you should do TikTok shop, you should
Yeah.
do Instagram, Pinterest influencers, or whatever, like whatever the insert trend here of that particular week is, right? So how do you and I speak with brands all the time, dozens of conversations every week, and they're always confused, relatively confused about strategy. So that whenever I say the word strategy, they would reply with a tactic. They would say something like seeding or gifting or paid collabs or UGC or something like that. And that's a
Yeah.
tactic. That's not a strategy. So I want you to dive into, like, because you work with a lot of brands on their influencer strategy, and you change their perception around what strategy truly means. So I want you to maybe do that for the audience that we have here and tell us a little bit about, if I'm a new brand, I want to, I'm new to influencer marketing. I've got product market fit. People love my product. How should I go about thinking about strategy? And then maybe if you could give us a few examples around for different budgets, different goals. Some people want sales, some people want awareness, different budgets as well. I think that'll be interesting, but I'll let you take it.
Yeah. The thing with the strategy is that a lot of brands circumvent and go directly to tactics because creating a strategy is a little bit of an introspective process. And in order to create a strategy, you need to think about what you want your brand to be. So this branding thing is, some people swear by it. Some people think it's very fluffy. Some people think you shouldn't be starting it until like 5 years in. Some people think you should start it right away. I'm one of the people that think you should start it right away, not in the traditional way of like pumping money into the branding, but branding is basically what kind of story do you want to tell when it comes to being in the mind of your consumer. That is pretty much what a strategy does. So when it comes to deciding like how to build a strategy, we decide where in the conversations that our customers have around our problems do we want to appear. So this is basically, if you take this statement and you overlay the traditional funnel on top of it, you'll realize that that's what it means. Because those are literally like how we traditionally define like the stages of awareness. It's the story, it's the customer journey, it's the story that the person goes from like realizing they need something to solving that problem and becoming someone else. And that is
Yeah.
just like, that's how you build the strategy. And you just establish that,
Mm.
and then you cascade down into the tactics.
Mm. So
Does this make sense?
yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I think starting pretty much with any marketing strategy, I think nobody nowadays talks about those levels of awareness. So I'm glad to see you mention that. And truly, any product is just taking somebody from like I like to think island A to island B, like they are at one place, they want to be at this dream island, and then your product takes them there. So it doesn't, like, the consumer at the end only cares about getting to island B. They don't really care if it's through a boat or through a plane or if you make them swim.
Yeah.
Now, different types of customers will be attracted to a boat or to swim to the other island or to fly to the other island or to teleport to the other island, right? And then that's your positioning, right? But then how do you take this fundamental concept and then translate that into a specific influencer strategy? How do you take that? Okay, let's maybe even feel free to come up with an example of a brand or like a brand that you've worked with and walk us through, okay, this is the brand, this is the product, here's how I would come up with a strategy.
Yeah. So the way I do it is, again, it relates to that understanding of influence, like you said. Influence starts in the mind. There's this debate in the influencer marketing space that influence means influencing someone to take direct action, but that's not true. Influence is actually a shift in perception. So the shift in perception, when you look at the cycle of influence, is like this big, and then you have a trigger here or like a lever, and then this is the road to action. But we're only measuring this. We're basing all the decisions on like this specific part right here. So I break down creating a strategy, like taking this and creating a strategy, and I put like the where, the why, and the how. This is like the easiest framework that anyone can understand. So where is like, where do my customers hang out and what do they do there? Obviously, again, I want to understand where those conversations that I want to be a part of happening, and this is where we do ICP research, which I talk about a lot on LinkedIn. And this is so crucial because everything you pull out from your ICP research is going to cut testing times, is going to reduce resources you spend in testing. It's going to change everything because, again, this is how we do it for GTM. This is how we do it for like MVPs, whatever. So why wouldn't we do this for influencer marketing? Why wouldn't we do this for this type of research for content?
Yeah.
It just makes sense.
So you're saying look at the when, the where, and the how of your customer's journey from going from A to B, and then design your strategy for every one of these components accordingly by first understanding all of that. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, where, why, and how. So where do they hang out? Why do I want to? The why doesn't necessarily stand it's not the customer's why, but is it your why? Like your why as a brand, why do you want to work with influencers? And this is the stage that we break down. This is again that stage that people skip and they go straight to tactics. But this is the stage where we do a very honest assessment and we understand, if I need sales from influencers, why do I need sales so badly? If I need awareness from influencers, why do I need awareness so badly, right? What went wrong for me to need that so badly? Because this forces you to look at your strategy holistically and not just like one piece of the puzzle. So you just ask a lot of questions, like what needs to happen in order for me to consider this a successful channel? And that's where you literally set goals and say, for me to consider this a successful channel, I would have to have an ROI of that, or I would have to get 10 million views, or I would have to do something. And that's how you got to your goals. Not you don't pull them out of thin air, but you actually ask like questions.
So that's interesting. So the goals actually come from the questions. You don't necessarily start with the goals. Okay. So that makes sense. How about budgets, and how do you see budgets play a role in this? Because maybe some brand is new. Like we've spoken to you in larger brands and they're like, we can't allocate budget to this because it's a brand new channel, versus we've seen some small brands just allocate their like 80% of their marketing budget on influencers. So how do you think about budgeting? And then how do you think about, how does budget influence strategy, if it does? Like, how do you think about the interplay between these two?
I always start with the brand. I see this a lot, and I advise against it always. This is one of the, everyone asks this. Everyone wants an answer. Give me a benchmark. Give me an answer. Give me this. Give me that. I cannot give you, and I refuse to give you an answer. Why? Because you, first of all, have to start with the budget that you can afford to spend at this stage. If you cannot afford to spend at this stage, and I'm giving you like pulling out a number and saying, yeah, spend $10,000 a month, and you don't have $10,000, and you maybe make that effort to get that $10,000 and expect the world for that because it's such a big effort for you, then you will consider influencer marketing to be a fail.
Yeah.
So if you start off with zero, then I'm gonna be like, okay, there's no zero technically because we will invest like some resources some time. But if you don't have like cash to actually put towards influencer marketing, we'll just start with COGS. We'll start with COGS. We'll start with offering a sales commission. We'll start with, working on those unit economics and see what makes sense. If you have some money, then we will establish the amount of money that you can pay safely without affecting cash flow. This is very, very important. I don't want you to like put aside that money and then, it eats into your cash flow. Anything that you can spend, keep to that. We will set that amount. I always take a buffer. So I buffer like 10 or 20% depending on the budget amount. That's just for negotiation, for anything that could happen. And then the rest, I figure out how to use that to achieve the goals that I set in the first stage. So if I say I need 10 million views, then I simply create scenarios and I play with them until I get like a number of influencers. I play with, okay, how many average views would I need to get that? How many influencers would I need to get that? What's the average price that I would be able to pay per influencer? So this way, again, is not going to match the reality of the pricing that you're going to get from when you contact influencers, but it doesn't have to. It has to match your business needs. It doesn't have to match what's out there because out there it's the Wild Wild West.
Yeah. Yep.
It's crazy.
Yeah, influencer prices are totally, and we can talk about that. But I think, okay, so that makes a lot of sense. So we covered strategy, we covered one of the things that you mentioned that I want you to maybe dive into more is you mentioned ICP research. I pretty much never see anybody talk about this in the influencer space. Because it's not exciting, right? It's not, send TikTok, get TikTok shop influencers or whatever, right? And make a lot of money. But then it's important. Like we keep talking about ICP all the time to our customers. So I want you to maybe like dive into that concept a little bit. Maybe if you could share another similar framework around how brands that are watching this can come up with their own ICP and then find the right creators accordingly. Because a lot of times, like one of the mistakes we see brands making is they go very broad with their creators. Like we'd see a vegan supplement brand who's reaching out to bodybuilding influencers because they think like that's the fitness influencer they should go for, but they should maybe be reaching out to vegan athletes or someone like that, which is more niche. And that understanding will only come if they truly get their ICP. So can you maybe share an example or a framework? How do you go about doing ICP research?
Yeah. So I do ICP research. This is something that I started doing a few years ago because within the brands and the companies that I was working with, we never seemed to get to have like enough data about what people are doing besides like transformation or talking about their problems, which is also very important and it is part of the ICP. But one of the things that prompted me to this was the absolute chaos that is social media, especially with the introduction of TikTok. The way content distribution has changed to the point where you cannot predict what's going to happen. And it prompted me like to think, okay, but what is the algorithm based on? The algorithm is based on human behavior. So basically, if we start understanding human behavior and human behavior within our bubble, like our branded bubble, we don't need to worry about the algorithm anymore because we know that no matter, you can give the example of LinkedIn, you can have a post flop. I have flopped posts that get like 300 impressions, but that bring me clients. And I don't care about that flop post because I know why I'm making it, right?
Correct.
So the 3 dimensions that I work on are demographic, which is the basic, getting demographics, transformational, which is pretty much the traditional ICP research where you ask about like how your ICP felt about their problem, what is that their life before, you try to understand their journey, right? Their journey from like the problem to all the way after they're solving the problem. And then the third part that almost nobody does, it's the behavioral part. And the behavioral part is where I want to understand ICP content consumption preferences and habits. So I want to understand where do they spend time, what do they watch and why? Because there's a big difference between going on YouTube looking for food recipes, right? Intentionality behind that, like I'm I want to create a recipe and I'm going and looking for that content. And spending time on TikTok where you have somewhat of an interest for food, but you're just like scrolling, and the volume and the intention behind you sitting down and scrolling on TikTok is completely different. So the content hits completely different.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Can you actually, so I think the demographic, so you mentioned three things. The demographic part should be like mostly obvious. I think also a lot of brands, when they do their ICP research, they purely focus on demographics. So they'll
Yeah,
be, okay,
that's just the
our ICP is a 35 to 50-year-old female living in the US, blah, blah, right? Whatever, right? So that's purely demographic. But you mentioned two other things. You said transformational and behavioral. Can you maybe solidify those two with examples? Like, what do you mean by transformational traits and then behavioral? Can you maybe give us an example, and so that it's very, very crystal clear?
Yeah. So transformational, it means that, think about it this way. Transformational is all about your product, like in relation to the customer. Behavioral, it's all about your customer. It's all about them and their interests, and it's about what type of content they consume out there. So you can think about it as like a circular motion, because you establish the demographics, then you go to the transformational stuff, and then you go to the behavioral content. But the behavioral actually brings them and turns them into your customers. So it's kind of like a cycle. So for examples, I would say when you're doing transformational, focus on like, what is it that your customer loves about your product, like main features, and stuff like that. Specific case studies on how they solve their problem with your product. Could be anything, right? For example, you could find out that, I don't know, some people use your soda pop to take stains out of t-shirts. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it could be a cool content idea. It could be a cool, like, top of the funnel content idea, right? Yeah. Why did they choose you over your competitors? Like, what did you have extra that prompted them? So this type of thing, and especially, how did they feel before that? How did they feel before? How did they feel when they found your product? And how did they feel after? Because those are going to be huge levers into you talking to future customers, talking to people that are one step behind, like in the journey.
Makes sense. Okay. That's interesting. I think the demographic piece, the first like very obvious piece, translates very easily into finding the right creators, because you can also like go log into a search engine, like a Saral, put in, hey, moms in the US, age, content type, and so on. But I think the other two, the transformational, like, so let's say, I think demographic is I am something, transformational is I want to be something, and then behavioral is I do this thing. Right. So I think that's the right way to put it, right? So I think transformational especially is really good for any sort of content ideas, because then it's like you can list like the top 3 transformations, like you listed the top 3 features, and then you could just be like, make different content using that angle. So, okay, that makes a lot of sense. All right. I think one of the questions that also kept coming in, because we took questions from when people registered, is tracking or measurement. I think measurement is also it's a little bit, has become a sensitive topic now, because a measurement is part of strategy, because if you set the goal, you would need something to measure your progress towards that goal, right? So how do you think about measurement? And it's so tricky, right? Because we have these customer calls and they're like, okay, these 10 influencers posted in the last week, we got this much in sales, but pretty much all the clicks kind of came, like the affiliate sales came from these 3 people. Does that mean the other 7 were useless? I'm like, no. Don't treat them like they're ad assets, right? It's not an ad. It's like those 3 only were able to make the sale because those other 7 did all the priming and all the customer education. And then finally, some people clicked and bought. How do you think about, so like affiliate is definitely one way to track, like directly track using links or discount codes. Another way is just track using total, like, hey, we spent this much on influencers. This was our incremental revenue, like super high level. How granular do you get? What metrics should brands even be tracking at different phases of their program? Can you talk a little bit about measurement and how you think about that?
Yeah. It's definitely a painful point for everyone. That is because, and I want to tell everyone in this call, attribution is shit. excuse my French, like everywhere.
I'm gonna
Like
write that down. I'm writing that down.
you talk to anyone in the space, anyone who deals with data, and they will tell you we are lying. We are lying to ourselves every day, all day. This is why, again, it links to that behavioral part, because if you just see the data without understanding what's behind it, you make a lot of assumption. For example, how a lot of marketers made assumptions about saves being a really important metric, being qualitative engagement. However, what I found, I had like a few clients that literally went in and I asked them, put it in the survey and ask your customers if, because they were focusing on saves. They were like, saves, Instagram told us saves are really, really important. So we're focusing on that. And I was like, great, go take a sample of like 600 of your customers, send a survey out and ask them how many of them go back to their saved posts. Do they save posts? Because I save posts and they just go into a black hole I never revisit. There might be other people that save, for example, if you save recipes or stuff, again, with that intentional scrolling, you create a collection of things that you want to revisit, right?
Yeah.
Turns out those people did not go to the saved post. They were like, I don't remember what I saved at. I don't know what's in my saved post. Ask them what's in this. I don't know what's in my saved post.
Yeah.
Completely different situation with shares, because interestingly enough, people could recall what they shared because it had an emotional, in order to share and in order to disrupt your experience on an app, you have to like have an emotional connection to that. So they remember that, oh, I shared on WhatsApp. I shared it like that and that. And then I shared it with my aunt because she wanted to buy, I don't know what, from Amazon. And I shared this with her, right? So don't make any assumptions on like the intention behind data. You need to like ask and connect those dots. This is why I don't like going crazy with KPIs in the first place. So keep it very, very light. Choose 2 or 3 that you want to focus on. Again, this goes back to the strategy. If you did your strategy right, there's no need for you to go crazy with KPIs because you know exactly what you want to achieve, and you have maybe like 2-3 max KPIs for every initiative that you establish within your strategy.
Yeah, understood. How do you, what are some, I think even with that, some brands may ask, what are those 3 KPIs that we should focus on? Okay, I won't care about all the 12 different things. But what are the top 3, or what are the, depending on their goals, maybe like how would you, or by phase, like usually the way we recommend is we do it by phase. But then how do you sort of track? Because initially you have nothing to track. Like for the first 2 months, really, like you're only inputting to track your input metrics, and then you slowly track like how many posts, and then eventually impressions, eventually sales. How do you go about this? Sort of, do you break it down into like a quarterly or a monthly, like, hey, month 1 track that, month 2 track this, month 3 track that? How do you go about, like, what are the exact KPIs that you would recommend brands track?
Yeah. So I track like 3 sets of KPIs. That's how I keep it, because sometimes you start, a lot of people just focus on like the performance KPIs, which performance is like a very vague term. Like, what's performance? What's performance? You're kind of like trying to do, what's happiness? What's love? It's performance. I don't know. So I divided into like the silo, not the silo, but like the pieces of your program. So one piece of your program is your team. One piece of your program is your content, and one piece of your program is the impact that the content drives. So it could be sales, it could be like whatever. So in the team performance KPIs, I track everything that the team does. So every single, from like building the database, right? Influencers added. You don't need to focus on the names of like the KPIs, just, you just need to be clear on what you want to track. So how many influencers are we discovering each month, right? If you're doing like a mix of manual and platform vetting, how much outreach are you doing? What is the open rate? What is the reply rate on that rate? How many people say yes from that? What is your posting rate? This is like a really big one, because you want to understand how many emails am I sending, and how many people am I actually achieving signing from that? Because I'm not a fan of like going out and contacting 20,000 influencers a month. I don't want to do that.
Correct. Yeah, I like it. Yeah, we also, posts per creator is such an important metric, Because if you're
Yeah.
doing seeding or gifting or affiliate, like you
Yeah.
really want to track how many times are these people, are they only posting once,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
fine because you send them a free product, they post once, but are they posting like thrice? Like maybe you should work with that creator more because they really love
Yeah.
your product. Yeah, I really
Yeah.
like the attribution is shit line. I say I have a more neutral version of that where I say attribution is not causation because a lot of times what happens
Yeah.
is a lot of times what happens is like people would see influencers post about you and they would Google search and they would click on a Google ad and they would buy, or they're more primed to click on a Facebook ad and
Yeah.
then buy. But then the attribution goes to Google or Facebook, but all the actual demand was driven by the influencer because they did that, what you said, like shifted perception enough so that the person would Google you 7 days later, they clicked on an ad and they bought. So the attribution went to Google, but it's not causation, right? So I like to say attribution is not causation. So
Yeah.
love it. Okay, awesome. I think we've covered a fair ground when it comes to strategy. We went into ICP, we went into like actual strategic stuff, the three-step framework, and we covered metrics and measurement. How do you also, by the way, for the people who are watching, feel free to keep sending I see a question from Christy here. Feel free to keep sending your questions as we speak, because we'll have 15 minutes towards the end actually addressing some of your questions. But Andrea, for you, I think I have an interesting question because so far we've been, chatting strategy. But I stalked your LinkedIn thoroughly for I think I went, pretty deep in there. But then you said something recently, you posted a thread or a post saying there is no bad content. There is just content you don't like. And you were talking about the type of content that brands expect from creators and how they want it to be on brand versus the type of content that creators actually create that maybe even performs, but the brands don't necessarily think it's on brand. And we face this all the time. So I really like this line of there is no bad content. There's just content you don't like. Can you talk a little bit more about that? If there's any stories or like examples around that you could share, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
actually this originated from a story that happened to me. It's not related to influencer marketing,
Mm-hmm.
but it was a realization that I made about myself about like quality and how people perceive quality and why there's just like no baseline for it.
Mm-hmm.
I used to run like a clothing store, like a secondhand. I used to thrift and have like vintage clothes, and I would have this client. She was very rich. She came in with like in a SUV. She had like luxury bags. She would like try on stuff, and she would always try on like these like scuba type like stretchy thick fabric dresses.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about, like that kind of like cheap but
Yeah.
sturdy material. And I could not wrap my head around it because I was trying to steer her towards like the cashmere and the natural cotton and this cut
Yeah.
and that cut and that cut. And I kept trying and trying and trying. And at some point she started laughing. She was like, I'm not stupid. Like,
Yeah.
I know that this fabric is not quality, or that
Yeah.
there are stuff that are better out there, but
Mm-hmm.
I have two kids. I need to run around. They're two boys. I need to run around with them like all day long. My dresses get ruined because I have to cook, I have to run around, blah, blah, blah. And I love these dresses because first, they're very form-fitting. I just love how I look in them. The fabrics, I can throw them in the washer, I can throw them in the sink, I can throw them in hot water, cold water, in a bucket.
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I just, they're easy to maintain, easy to clean. And I just, whenever, and they last me forever. I don't
Yeah.
have to worry about. And that blew my mind because I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
All this time, I was trying to push my idea of quality with this complete disregard on what quality means in the context of this person's wants and lifestyle.
Mm.
She didn't care about like cashmere clothes. She cared about something that helped her achieve her personal goals in the most effective and efficient way. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I
That's
think,
what quality is.
yeah, it's such an interesting, and we see this story play out even with brands where they have a perception of their
Yeah.
customers, and then because you had a perception of this customer, she's like
Yeah.
in a big car wearing
Yeah.
designer stuff, and then you would expect her to then naturally buy cashmere, but no, like she wanted something else. So that's interesting. How do you think brands should go about understand, because in your case, it was one person. You were able to speak with her and you were able to make this out. How do you, because brands don't necessarily, there's no one person, they usually are dealing with some sort of an ICP persona, and they're like a little bit more vague. How do you go about installing this awareness in brands? Like, hey, or like how do brands come to this realization? How do you propose they do that?
It's where the behavioral part comes in. Again, it's all really, I'm sorry to
ICP.
sound like, like a broken disc. I'm so sorry. Because if you understand the intent with
Uh-huh.
behind the scroll,
Uh-huh.
like I didn't understand the intent behind like the person buying that specific dress.
Mhm.
If I go on TikTok and I
Hmm.
associate TikTok with entertainment,
Hmm.
my expectation is to be entertained.
Hmm.
I don't care about your HD
Hmm.
videos telling me about bringing that cool influencer. I don't care.
Hmm.
I want to see dog videos. I want to see bring a dog. I don't care if you're selling sports car, put a dog on that car. That's what I want to see.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of brands are, like, oh my God, we could not do that because our customers are this and this. How do you know?
Hmm.
Show me
Yeah.
the data.
Right. Right. Makes sense. Okay. This is kind of related, maybe a more tangential topic to this. This is a little bit higher level, but to crystallize this more for brands, this is related to creative briefs, right? The way this misunderstanding about what the type of content that customers want would manifest is in the briefs that brands give influencers. And we've seen some really tight briefs where it's like, say this, say this, say this. Like, no, like you're seeding creators. Like, don't try to make them say like your three token like talking points. Like they know their audience. A person's not stupid. Like they've built an audience of 20,000 people. They know what people want to hear, right? Like let them say what they want. Right. So how do you, but again, like on the flip side, brands don't want influencers to say the wrong thing about their product. There's, generally some things you could say, some things you could not say, maybe especially in, areas like supplements, or maybe there's some sort of regulation going on over there. How do you balance these two sides where you want to give them creative freedom while also making sure that they kind of say what you want them to say? How do you go about that?
Yeah. This is a concept that I thought about a lot, and it's like it was part of the ICP research. Again, with the ICP, I know. So this is a problem about brands being brand centric and not being audience centric, not even customer centric, but just like
Yeah.
audience centric. So what you have to do is you have to exclude yourself as a brand from the process and understand that the synergy, to use like a LinkedIn buzzword, the
Yeah.
connection that you need to achieve is between your ICP and the creator's IVP. IVP is the ideal viewer profile that every single
Right.
creator has,
That's interesting.
because every single creator creates for a reason. And this is where the
Mhm.
whole debate with like creator versus influencer comes from, which I'm not going to
Mhm.
get into it because I have a
Let's
very
not get into it. Yeah.
about for everybody else, and I'm going to upset
Yeah.
people. But
Yeah.
but the point is that relates to the intention with which like the creator creates.
Uh-huh.
So again, there are people who just love creating. There are people who want to monetize right off the bat, and these people have different IVP. They have a different ideal viewer profile.
Right.
Now, when you take these two bubbles, the overlap of them is what you need to create. You cannot create if you have like two different, very distinct ideas of what this is where you reach true creative alignment by understanding who your ICP is and by understanding who the IVP is, right? So basically the IVP is the creator's ICP. I just
Correct.
put
Correct.
two
Names
names
to it.
because
That makes sense.
right. So what I do is I use prompts and I extract those from research as well. So instead of telling the influencer, say this, say the product is this, read these features, say this, blah, blah, blah. I just say, if you were to recommend this to someone close, what would you say? If you were to, I don't know, choose one feature that you think would be a game changer for someone close, what would it be? If you were to present, if you were to do an exercise where you would choose this product over a competitor product, what would you say? Like debate the two products,
Yeah.
comparison content,
Yeah.
that type of thing.
That's very
Um,
interesting. Yeah, so like you're saying that you just prompt them so you directionally kind of like let them think in a certain direction that you want them to think in,
yeah.
but then you wouldn't give them exact talking points like, hey, say this, say that, that they can come up with. You're just prompting them. That's a very interesting way. I have not seen. Again, that's why it's so good to have you on because you always have like this. You
And it
just
works.
yeah. Totally. Okay. So I understand now all of this. How do you? So let's say there's a brand that's on this call. They understand strategy. They do their ICP research, they come up with their metrics and their goals. They
Mhm.
understand they're not supposed to, have a very,
Mhm.
very tight creative brief and so on. How do they
Mhm.
go about testing different? So one of the first things that we ask brands to test when they onboard onto Saral is we ask them, hey, spend the first few weeks just testing different types of ICPs or niches of influencers, like test vegan runners, test, bodybuilders, test, like different, like your ICP. You may have multiple customer personas, test
Mhm.
different influencers for those personas, see who performs really well. How do
Mhm.
you suggest? I think one of the audience questions also later that somebody put in when they registered was, how do we not waste time testing different things, or how do we make sure that we're testing the right things so we're not wasting time or like just, testing and nothing's working 3 months down the line? Do you have any tips or suggestions on setting the right direction when you're testing different campaigns and you're early in the process?
Yeah. So first thing is, what I would recommend and what I do recommend is choose one cohort you want to
Hmm,
test.
hmm,
Because if you A/B test, I worked once with this client that his idea of A/B testing was like testing seven things at one at the same and
Like
seven
A, B,
different
C,
things.
D, E, F testing?
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
comparing them, and they're like, "Oh, this doesn't work. This doesn't work." And I'm like, "That's not A/B testing. You just like went out there and said." This was for email, but still,
Yeah.
it's just like you just went out there and blasted 5,000 people with seven different emails. That's not. So choose one cohort of influencers to test and try to achieve a little bit of volume because
Hmm,
15 people 10 15 people, it's not a good sample to
mhm,
extract enough data. Like
hmm,
I've recently started advising for a company that does this, like I analyzes at scale,
mhm.
and even with AI, 20 videos to analyze from
Yeah,
influencers is not enough.
not
It
enough.
doesn't give us like you can see the difference in data, in the quality of data at
Hmm,
scale where we analyze like 200
hmm,
versus 15.
hmm,
It's not comparable. So what
hmm,
I would say for testing is, first you have to be okay with the fact that influencer marketing has a ramp up like testing period of at minimum 3 months.
hmm,
You need to give it that 3 months. First of
hmm,
all, because the content, it does not reach peak in 7 days anymore.
hmm,
I have TikToks that gathered like millions of views after 6 months.
hmm.
We posted them. I didn't even know. I just checked. I was like, let's see what happened.
Yeah.
Millions,
Hmm,
millions of views.
hmm.
Right? That's
Yeah.
that's huge. That unlocks more budget, unlocks more, like, completely changes the performance of your program.
Yeah.
So stay uh, um stay on one cohort. If you want to test
Hmm,
in niche and choose like maybe one specific aspect of your niche, right? So if you want to test momfluencers, just test momfluencers
hmm,
and extract data from that. Then you move on to the next cohort and the next one and the next one. That's
hmm,
if you're starting from zero
hmm,
and there's no content pollution out there. There's no like other content that's flying around
hmm,
that's going to skew your data, because it is going to skew your data
hmm.
if there is.
I like it. Okay, so go cohort by cohort, and then what's the time period you would test these in? Would this be weekly, bi-weekly? How would you, or even shorter, like how often would you switch cohorts?
Um, I would give it at least 30, 45 days. So
Okay, per cohort. Okay.
you need to reach the 30-day mark, because
Yeah.
otherwise the data is not gonna be data ink.
Data's not dating. Okay. Makes sense. This brings me to a related question. You touched upon it. Is there's always this quality versus quantity debate that's ongoing, right? There's one end of the spectrum that's like, hey, just work with a dozen really high quality influencers, let an agency find them for you and just work with them. And there's another end, which is also another example you used, is they would blast 20,000 emails every month to influencers and then just completely spray and pray. How do you, and like you also with that said, you also said you have to do enough volume where it's at least, you get some insights out of it. So the data starts dataing, right? So how do you test? How do you go about, like, what's the ideal volume? If somebody's watching this and they want to start in March, like how many influencers should they be reaching out to or sending product to? What are the general typical volume recommendations from you?
Okay. There are no typical volume recommendations. There are metric marginal increases recommendations that I can make. That is because it very much depends on what kind of brand you are, what kind of industry you are, and the price point of your product. Because I cannot advise someone who has a $200 product to send out 300 pieces a month.
Correct.
Because the unit economics don't work for them. You have a $10 product, amazing. Let's go and send it out to everyone, because with volume, you again, there's always like this balancing act where like, okay, I have a low priced item and a lot of people might not be interested in that. It might not be a life-changing item that I can like get content instantly and get people super excited about if it's not, at least gimmicky a little bit. So I would need volume to compensate that. Like a little bit more volume, not crazy volume, but a little bit more volume. The way I approach it is I don't like volume for one purpose. It's okay to for example, for affiliate, you need volume. Like you can't do volume, right? You need, if you want to onboard hundreds of people, you need to contact at least a few thousand. But what I like to do is, if I get a list of 1,000 people, I want to keep the metrics of working that list as high as possible. So for me, and I say this over and over again, I say this to my consulting clients, it is unacceptable for me, whether we're talking affiliate, whatever we're talking, to have a list of 1,000 contacts and not speak to at least half of them in the course of like 3 months. You have 3 months to work that list to the bone and not go out there and like scrape. That is why the 3-month ramp up is so important, because first you're going to learn how to strategize, do that, all that, and you'll also learn how to work your list. Because if you learn how to work on 1,000 contact list at that level, right? So it goes like, I want 80%, 70-80% open rate. I want 50% response rate. From that response rate, doesn't matter. Some are going to say yes, some are going to say no, some are we're going to negotiate, whatever. It doesn't matter. I just want to speak to half of those people. 50% of the people that say yes, I want to sign. Right? I might run out of budget. I might, there might be variations, but I want that metric, right? From that, 80 to 90%, again, depends. If you're running a gifting, it might be, you could be like at 60, 70%. Keep it high. I don't care. I don't want to hear about the 30% industry standard or 20% or whatever it is. I don't want to hear about that, right? You keep it as high as possible. Because if you achieve that balance in the first 3 months of your program, think about what you're going to do with a list of 5,000 people.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, that'll be super powerful. Makes sense. Yeah, I think that what you just said there, we're probably going to clip that and we're going to send it to as many people as possible, because that will shift a lot of perceptions about how to test and how to go about this. Okay. I think I want to go to we have a couple of questions here in the chat because we have maybe about 10 more minutes. But then folks, you're on this call. If you're liking this, drop in like a quick, clap emoji. And then if you want to speak with Andreea, she's opened up some slots she's keeping full with her consulting practice, as you can imagine, with all of the knowledge that's in her brain, but she's opened up some slots on her calendar. So I just dropped her Calendly link before we go to audience questions, in case somebody wants to book in a direct meeting with the intention of working with Andreea. Go to that Calendly, book in a meeting right away. So you get some personalized advice and hopefully get to also work with Andreea. But session's not over yet. We have 10 minutes and I'm going to do some nice, interesting audience questions. So I think Junaid has sent in a couple of questions and Amanda right after that, and there's some overlap between those two. So I want to maybe merge those two questions and take them as one. How do you go about, this is interesting because a lot of influencer marketing, we always talk about products, right? How do you, and I know you've worked across like over your decade plus of influencer marketing, you worked in tech, you've worked in different types of products and niches of companies and so on. How do you go about doing this for service-based brands? Like Amanda here mentions travel experiences where tactics like seeding are just, you can't seed a travel experience, right? How do you go about doing that? Or we have, like, for example, we have a massage studio who uses Saral. I can share what they do, but then how do you go about doing this for a service-based business?
Pretty much the same. It's just that it's localized. So with a service based, I would always start with localized, not just localized influencers, but influencers who have a localized audience. Or we look at the data usually when it comes to service businesses, or for example, foot traffic, right? Or like retail stores or stuff like that. If you have an online presence, you look at, okay, where's the overlap between like our in-store demographic, like the people who actually buy the services in person, and the people who follow us on social media or like go on our website and stuff like that, or that we target with our ads, and where you see the overlap where you have like the highest success, right? The highest success in ads with the highest success in like the in-person purchase. It's going to overlap. It's not going to be 100%, right? But it is going to overlap. That overlap is where you need to focus with your influencer marketing. So you need to look at those demographics. You pick people with those specific demographics, with those specific like interests, locally based. And then again, when you give the product, you give the product, but you don't actually gift the product, you gift the experience of the product, right? You give the transformation, you give like the novelty of trying something new. So if you can sell the service to your clients, you should also be able to sell it on influencers, because this is, I think, a really interesting aspect of the service industry. If you can get an influencer who's like a lot more versed and a lot more like picky, to get excited about your service and your experience, you probably will have no problem in selling that to someone who's not as well versed, right? So I would say events, like invite local influencers, organize events. You can even like give some vouchers, pretty much any kind of like area you have in your, for example, I think it was like hotels, right? Hotels. Got the things I would do in a hotel. I would just invite influencers to create content in the lobby. Like, what is the most beautiful part of your lobby? Close it down, or ask them where there's like not in a day where there's like not a lot of foot traffic, and ask them to create whatever content.
And influencers want content. Like that's, I think, one of the things that brands also have to understand is they literally want, that's their job. Like they make content. Right. So if you're able to send them a product, or send them an unboxing experience, or invite them to your, travel experience or hotel or whatever, or restaurant or cafe or whatever, like physical location, and that means really good content for them, they're going to come and they're going to make content, and you're going to get promoted as a side effect of them making content.
Exactly.
Just stays the same for service businesses, except you seed them with not the product, but an experience or some sort of a free stay at the hotel or a meal at the restaurant or whatever, right? Okay.
People are always curious. Like if you go on social media, people are always curious. Like, where's that? Where's that? Oh, that looks amazing. Where's that? Where's that? Where's that? Right? You don't even have to showcase and like put it front and center. You just have to make it look like that person is having the time of their life. And you don't have to make it look. You just have to, let them in and offer them the time of their lives. And that's going to translate into the content.
Totally. Yeah, love that. And then second question here from Daniel. Daniel has a bunch of questions, but then I'm going to pick one thing from there. And I have another audience question that Adriana from BB Company put in when she registered. I don't know if Adriana, you're on this call, but feel free to drop in a hi if you are. She said, how do you opt in? And that's also what Daniel asked in one of his questions, is how do you optimize the content creation rate for seeding programs? Because a lot of the times, and some of our brands also face this, is they would send out product. I know this kind of goes back to ICP again, but they send out product and then influencers don't post, or maybe only 10 or 20% of influencers post, but they want 50 to 70% of them to post. So how do you, are there any tactics? Is there anything that you would do differently if, let's say, a brand comes to you, they book in a meeting via that Calendly, and they're like, hey, Andrea, we are seeding products, we're doing all of this, but then only 10% of people are posting. What would you advise them to do differently?
There's two things that brands don't do that is discussed every single time. I get this question all the time. And then I ask them, okay, so show me what you're doing. Walk me through whatever you're doing. And what they're doing is, first, they're just creating these lists. They're like, well, it's nano influencers, so of course they're going to want to post about our product. And I'm like, yeah, you went to the other 280,000 DTC brands that are on LinkedIn and have seen that micro influencers, they're seated. Put more effort into the vetting stage. So when you create, I like to create like a criteria, like a cheat sheet with criterias where I look at, okay, all the aspects that I want my creators to kind of tick, right? Because that's like a cheat sheet criteria. And again, I put a little bit more time and a little bit more effort creating a list manually and sourcing people manually and then vetting them with like a platform to see insights. And this is why I'm gonna have a smaller list. And I put all this effort and I vetted them and I look at their content manually. I could use AI, sure, I could take shortcuts, but I still will need to like vet that list manually. I put all that effort to find like 500 people, right? What I do is while you're vetting the people, what I like to do is I like to go over the list and also personalize slightly. You don't have to go crazy with the personalization, but a lot of people don't know how to do personalization. They just like forget how to talk to people. They're like, oh, I love your content and I love the way you connect with your audience. No, stop it. Okay. I go through their accounts and if I have a spreadsheet, I just put like a line of notes and I say, I really love the colorful dresses that you're wearing. Like I love the floral patterns just like look so good. Where'd you get those from? Right? Or I saw that you like hiking. I like hiking as well. Are there like a lot of mountains? Do you have any recommendations for like good hiking gear? Nobody does that. Like who does that? Nobody does that.
Not a lot of people. Yeah.
The second thing is you have to not go, if you're saying this is what irks me with seeding, if you're saying no strings attached, then it's no strings attached.
Correct.
You cannot say no strings attached and then come back and say, I'm attaching some strings actually. Because it's either a barter where you are upfront and say, I will send you this product and you can post, and I'm assuming, I'm taking the responsibility for the fact that you might not like this or you might not prioritize this. That's okay. But if you're saying I'm sending you a gift, then I'm saying you're sending a gift.
Yeah.
So what I like to do is I like to kind of gauge the interest of these people by asking them questions in the first email. Ask them questions about the product. If someone's not willing to sit down for 2 minutes and answer 2 questions in an email, when you're asking them, hey, do you use like wet wipes with aloe vera? Is that something that you use to take your makeup off? If they're not willing to say, yes, I love them, they're not going to post.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And then you don't go back because a lot of brands do this, and I'm going to need you to stop doing this because this is why it's not working. They just go back and say, when are you going to post? When are you going to post? When are you going to post? Hi, when are you going to post? No. You go back and you say, here's what other people are saying about this product. Give me honest feedback. Like honest feedback. I want you to rip into this product. I want you to tell me everything that I can make better about this. So the good and the bad, I want it all. Here's like a cool story from our customer base. This is like here's what other people have posted about this product. Maybe it could serve as inspiration for you. We didn't think about anyone doing this type of content, but maybe it would help you. This type of thing. And then you ask, hey, I would love to make it up to you if you're thinking about posting. How can I incentivize you? What would you need? Would you need like a base commission? What would you need? What could I do for you? That's how you approach it.
I like it. So you went really, I love the breakdown because you went back to like the basics, like finding the right creator. Then every step of the way is like everything affects everything, right? Like who the creator is, the perfect outreach message with personalization sent to a creator that is not in your ICP doesn't matter. Right? So like find your ICP creator, send them the right personalized outreach message, make sure that you're not pushy, make sure you're not saying no strings attached in the email and then attaching strings later on. We see that in emails and we ask them to get rid of it. Like, don't write that. There is clearly strings attached. That's fine. Like influencers know there's strings attached. They know why you're sending them free product, right? Let's not pretend otherwise. So yeah, I love that. I think that is I know we're at the top of the hour here and I want to be sensitive of your time and the audience's time. So I think that's there are like 7 other questions that we could cover, but I think we can keep them for another potential webinar like this that we would do in the future. It was really great having you on. Again, if anyone wants to speak with Andreea directly, I've dropped in the Calendly link. Go on there. What we'll also do is whoever is on this webinar right now, stay on 30 more seconds because my team will download the list from Zoom and we'll send you all specifically a link to Andrea's course. There's a course on Gumroad that you can subscribe and watch her. Very structured. I know there were a few questions here that we did not take in the chat that were a little bit more introductory, like how do we set up? What are the KPIs? Which influencers do you find? If you need exact frameworks, templates, everything, Andreea has a really great course. I've personally skimmed through some of it and I've learned a lot. We'll send a link to that course over email. Definitely go check it out. And if you need to book in her consulting time, go do that on the calendar. I hope you all have loved this. I hope, Andreea, you liked coming on here and chatting and geeking out about some of this stuff. And then I hope we get to do this once again in a few months.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It was great. So yeah, feel free to book a time with me. It's a discovery call. We can even if you just want to say hi and give me feedback, give me the good and the bad about this webinar. I am fully open to it.
Love it. Yep, that's what I like about you. Always open to feedback. It was great having you on, Andreea. We'll do this again. There's a lot more ground to cover. I think it's a really good preliminary sort of strategy related session with a lot of tactical advice. So we'll end it here. Thank you so much. I know it's late for you as well, where you're at. So I'll let you go. Thank you for doing this. Bye, Andreea. Bye,
Thank you.
everyone else. Yep.
Bye.
Bye, bye, bye.